Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Wednesday, April 29th, 2026, and today we're going to talk about weeds. Specifically, can weeds tell us anything useful about the soil? We'll cover weeds that just won't take the hint and managing this year's weeds for next year, so let's do it. All right, happy Wednesday, everyone. I hope you all are doing well for this midweek check-in. So today's show is going to be mostly a compilation episode, except, of course, for this intro that I'm doing right now. It is indeed Wednesday as I record it. So we'll go back and visit some segments I've done on weeds and replay those today. During the growing season, it's hard for me to find interview time or for the growers I want to speak to have the time to talk. It also takes a little stress off me during the growing season to have these hybrid or compilation episodes for you. So for most of the summer, Wednesdays will be something like this and then a monthly live episode with the occasional interview thrown in. But to give it a little freshness, let's talk about some of what I've been up to this week. Yesterday was a harvest day, so I did that. Lots of in particular, the great lettucing of 2026 has definitely begun. I don't grow strawberries for market, but we harvested a bunch of those. We'll eat what we can, freeze what we can or whatever, and then we'll sell the rest. And beets. Beets are coming in as well. Love me some early spring beets. Super tasty. Always a nice treat, especially with the way the beet greens look right now. I put some cover crop down as well. I just literally ran over it with a mower, all in the same direction for reasons that maybe I'll explain later. That area is going to be watermelons, which I just can't wait. Always ready to eat some, melons basically every day if I could. I kind of think that's a hydration thing. I mean, the electrolytes in watermelons are really good. So I think I struggle to stay hydrated in general. So I think watermelons and we have like a nice little symbiosis there. That cover cropped area is going to be going under tarp for a little while just to kill it down. And then that means I have to go ahead and get my melons started in trays probably today. Otherwise, the garden really popped to life after all that rainfall we got. And it's going to be my charge to get the paths mowed and a few beds cultivated ASAP, probably today, but we'll see. While, of course, planting and starting seeds and harvesting and all the rest of the stuff that I have to be doing. I'm here for it, though. Body-wise, I feel relatively good this year, considering. Thanks, yoga. So I'm hoping for a busy but smooth season, at least as far as like back pain and stuff goes. How are things going on your farms? Let us know. Or better yet, send us a 20-second farm video clip to farmermike@notillgrowers.com. Just upload that to Google Drive or Dropbox and share it with Mike. Thanks, and without further ado, because I know we're all eager, Weeds, the novel. Or the horror story, or both. Yeah, enjoy. Okay, so last week I discussed weeds and using them in the garden, and a couple people mentioned that weeds are good signifiers of certain soil issues. And on the one hand, that's kind of true. And on the other hand, it's kind of not. To be honest with you, using weeds for nutrient deficiency identification or evaluating pH and all that stuff is not super well supported, or at least it's not very helpful. Certainly there are weeds that have narrow nutritional needs, but by and large, the role, if you will allow me a small anthropomorphization there, of weeds is to cover disturbed soil as quickly as possible. In reality, most weeds are just advantageous recovery species looking to get in wherever they fit in. Disturbed soil is often slightly more bacterial leaning in nature because, as we have also discussed, tillage promotes oxygen-loving bacteria over fungi. Disturbed soils are often also more depleted because those organisms consuming the organic matter or leaching of nutrients, or all the above. So for that reason, there is some evidence that weeds do not thrive in healthier, more microbially balanced soils. But in that case, weeds are only telling us if our soil is disturbed and maybe not as healthy as we'd like it to be. They're not telling us what the chemistry looks like. Generally speaking, just because a certain weed prefers a certain pH or nutrient makeup does not mean it doesn't grow in other situations. It just may be that that particular weed doesn't thrive as much, similar to vegetable crops, in one condition or another. It will still germinate, it will still likely grow, it just may not grow as fast as the other weeds or crops who like those conditions. In conventional agriculture, this concept is slightly different because one, well, we're talking about a lot of land under one or two crops, and two, weeds will respond differently to certain synthetic fertilizers such as nitrogen and phosphorus, or the lack thereof, than they will to simple organic practices. Using a weed to indicate a certain soil condition in organic systems is just not super reliable because they will grow in many conditions. They may just really grow well in specific conditions or next to specific crops. Like I've heard anecdotally that weeds like sourdock grow in compacted soil, and sure, that's fine. They do. I've seen them. But anecdotally, I've observed sourdock growing in some of my loosest beds as well as some of my most compacted areas. There is a commonly cited article from the University of Michigan Extension that lists a bunch of weeds and what they indicate, but not a single citation. And I cannot find anything to back up the idea for any of them, except that some of those plants do prefer certain conditions, which again is not helpful because that doesn't mean they won't grow in other conditions, just maybe not as vigorously. So cool, that describes almost every plant. And if weeds are getting to the point that you can tell which ones are thriving and which ones are not, well, the giant weeds there will be a bigger problem than any nutrient deficiency they illuminate. For weeds, there just has to be a seed there, moisture, and the right temperatures plus time and disturbed soil. The chemical makeup of the soil, the available nutrients, may matter a little bit to the overall community of weeds, but not really. Not to any helpful extent, at least. This may also be true because I came across some research that indicated basically the way we farm now favors generalized weeds, which means that many weed species are no longer really prevalent enough, weeds that may have been more indicative at one time of specific soil conditions. Anyway, I feel like that idea that weeds indicate something specific about soils may be true sometimes, and can be true of certain biological communities within the soil, but it's one of those weird garden topics that isn't totally wrong, but isn't totally right either, or necessarily helpful. In my experience, weeds germinate when the temperatures are right, and so the soil is exposed. So exposed soil and the presence of weed seeds. That's largely what weeds indicate. Anyway, I don't want to pretend I've looked at every piece of research on this particular subject, but I did spend a fun, nerdy morning on it. So let me know your thoughts, as always. Today's episode is brought to you by Grown By. Grow smarter with Grown By, the farmer-owned cooperative. Grown By is the platform for online sales of everything, custom and traditional CSAs, halves of beef, flower bouquets, wholesale to restaurants, and now Grown By supports in-person sales too. Their new app, Grown By Register, you can supercharge your market and farm stand, finally bringing together your online and offline sales and customer data. Grown By is proud to make local food accessible by processing SNAP benefits online and in person right within the app. Grown By helps you put your best food forward. Schedule a demo at coop.grownby.com/no-till. That's coop.grownby.com/no-till. Today's episode is also brought to you by Good Agriculture. Good Agriculture handles farm bookkeeping and tax filing, so there is no scrambling at tax time. They keep your books clean and up to date and show you where your farm's finances stand. If you're behind, they'll get you caught up. They also help farmers find funding and stay ahead of grant deadlines. You run the farm, they help the business. Learn more at goodagriculture.com/info. That's goodagriculture.com/info. All right, back to the show. All right, our first Patreon question comes to us from EB, who writes, quote, "Thank you so much for this amazing series. Your show is both inspiring and practical and so fun to learn from. Thank you. My boyfriend and I have a 20 by 20 garden plot in an organic community garden, and this is our first year in the space. Unfortunately, we have inherited some unforgiving weeds, mugwort, and a bit of poison ivy, but thankfully lots of strawberry runners in the mix too. My question is about the mugwort. Individual mugwort stalks are easy to pull by hand, but the problem is that it grows via rhizomes, and it keeps popping up over the entire plot despite how much we hand pick it at the base. Mulch does nothing either. It grows quickly and is constantly encroaching on all of our young vegetables. I am worried it will steal nutrients and water from them, stunting their growth. What is the best way to combat this, or I suppose any relentless rhizome-based weed, naturally, considering we already have crops growing there? Do we just have to keep picking it to eventually kill off the rhizomes over a few years, or is there a better way for such a large space? We only have a few basic garden tools, a few shovels, a pickaxe, and hedge trimmers, but no weed whacker. I don't know if you have experience with this plant in your area too, but we would love any advice you or your audience can share. We are in Zone 7A in central New Jersey, and our soil is thankfully very alive with organic matter and lots of beneficial creatures. Thanks again," end quote. All right, EB, awesome. Thank you for the kind words, and bummer about the mugwort and poison ivy. Members of my family are wildly allergic to it, so when we see it in the garden, it's a bit of a big deal. Luckily, however, poison ivy is a bit easier to get rid of, with gloves on, of course, than mugwort. Mugwort, as you mentioned, isn't too deterred by being pulled because the amount of energy it stores in its roots, it just kind of keeps putting shoots out. So it's going to take a multi-pronged approach to get rid of mugwort, assuming, of course, you don't want to just take your plot out of production for a year and tarp it to kill that mugwort that way. So one option could be something like burlap ground cover. I'm definitely curious after seeing the experiments that Ben Hartman has been doing with using burlap in place of plastic landscape fabric, which would, if nothing else, at least concentrate your weed efforts to just where the holes are where you inserted the plants. So essentially everywhere that the burlap is, there would be no mugwort coming through in theory, but only through the holes where the plants are that you planted. Then after a year or so of that, the mugwort would, at least in theory, be greatly diminished. You could also take more time to dig down and get those roots, like where the rhizomes themselves, when you are pulling the mugwort. And the more you can reduce the root mass, the less energy it will have to compete. If you can also keep it from ever really getting leaves up, then you will effectively cut off its power supply, which would be the sun. Leaves are solar panels, roots are batteries. Whatever you can do to disconnect those things as much as possible, the better. I would recommend adding to your quite fun and eclectic list of tools a stirrup hoe to just cut it down as soon as it surfaces. Unless, of course, you're working with straw or hay mulches, in which case your hands will be easier, if not the only real option to get them out of mulches. Also, absolutely allow for no seed rain, especially with this crop, meaning you cannot let this one go to seed or it is going to become a major headache, or an even bigger headache, I guess. This may be a plant that you have to deal with for an extended period of time, but as long as you do some of those simple things, the problem should decrease slowly over time. And any weed barriers that you can add below the mulch, such as mulch paper perhaps, could also lend a nice hand. So anyway, I hope that's at least a little bit helpful to your issue. Today's episode is brought to you by Rimmel Greenhouses. Whether you're growing tomatoes for market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a high tunnel protected from the weather provides the right environment for harvest you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality you need to grow productively year-round. The team of experts at Rimmel Greenhouse Systems will be your trusted partners to ensure you get exceptional value from your greenhouse or high tunnel investment. Visit Rimmel.com today to get growing. All right, back to the show. All right, so I've kind of talked about this recently, but I know, at least for some of you, May was super hopeful and glorious, but by July, that hope was gone, like literally buried in some weeds, beneath some grasses or bindweeds or amaranths or whatever. So you mowed it or you gave up, and now you're looking at basically the same thing that you started with, like a field of weeds or grasses. Now, you want to reclaim it, you want to try again, but maybe this time it's a little bit worse because there's weed seeds and perennial grasses and that sort of stuff have reestablished themselves, so what to do? All right, well, the first thing is to try and take stock of the weeds, like what weeds we're dealing with here. Was it annuals like spiny amaranth, which are painful but manageable within a season, or was it perennials like Johnson grass or Bermuda grass that took over and decided to pop a squat? Because perennial weeds can be a little bit more difficult than your annual weeds. If it was mostly summer annuals like amaranths or lamb's quarters or something along those lines that don't survive the winter but do put down a lot of weed seeds, then this is a problem with one of three solutions. The first solution is mulch. Neither of those plants that I mentioned, but most of those sort of annual weeds appreciate being mulched, which is good for you. That mulch can be whatever makes sense in your context and for the crops that you grow. But if you mulch over top of them really well and do not expose the soil again, they will not be so much of a problem. If mulch is not an option though, then stale seed bedding is probably going to be your best option. That is prepping those beds again in the spring, however you plan to do that. And then not planting anything. Soak the beds, get them to germinate, cultivate the weed seeds, and then possibly repeat that process again if need be. Amaranths in particular are very shallow germinators, so any disturbance can bring up a fresh flush. Tarping can help with either, but I find it's most effective at speeding up the stale seed bedding process. Tarp to get them to germinate earlier, cultivate them out, tarp again, repeat. Then you will still have to cultivate those beds well, throughout the course of the season. Of course, if you can leave a tarp on there through the first relatively hot month, which for us is usually May, that can also help. But if you're trying to get away from plastic and get into the garden a little bit earlier, stale seed bedding will be the best option. Now, the perennial weed takeover is just going to be more complicated if that is what you're dealing with. I've talked about bindweed and Johnson grass recently already, and I've mentioned how Johnson grass does not do well under compost mulch, but loves hay and straw mulches. Bindweed cares not about which mulch you use. It's good with whatever. It's happy. Bermuda grass is similar to Johnson grass in that a good compost mulch can greatly diminish its growth, at least in my experience, whereas other mulches may not be as effective. In fact, I've got a question coming up soon from a Patreon member about non-plastic options for these. But like I said last week, most growers use a full year of tarping to get bindweed under control. There are other options, but they are just as long-term and more intensive. Something like thistle will likely need the same sort of level of commitment long-term. In these cases, if it's me, I'm going to prep the garden like it's a brand new plot of ground and tarp it until at least mid or late summer, then plant a fall cover crop followed by a winter killed cover crop. That should get most of it in check, and then have the beds ready and happy by the spring. You will just have to remain vigilant so it doesn't happen again in the short term. If your garden is ever just getting lost, just mow it down so you don't end up with the weed seed trouble on top of, any sort of perennial roots or whatever. All right, I hope you enjoyed that little compilation episode. Don't forget, No Till Growers is a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That is an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors, and if you'd ever like to sponsor this show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Big thank you to Michelle for all of her work and to the No Till Growers Board of Directors. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and my wife Hannah for absolutely everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support this work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of, well, it's April still, but soon May, April, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Steel, but not like the metal, and also not like to take something from somebody, but Steel, and Ursula. So shouts to both of you for keeping the story going this week, which you will remember is about our revolutionary named Jeffy, who is feeling oppressed, and clearly the sentiment is shared with the rest of his friends and followers. The powers that be are stifling dissent, shutting down communication, manipulating the narrative to turn the good guys into terrorists. Typical, authoritarian shtick. So Jeffy gives his speech and then steps off the stage and into the crowd, who parts as he approaches and then follows in behind him towards the large opening that leads to a giant room where the oppressors are feasting. And as they walk, they are chanting the name of our story this week: take it back, take it back. This is powerful stuff. You'll see. You'll find out. Thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you tomorrow. Bye.
I'm no designer, but I know my brand inside and out, and I know a generic-looking website when I see one. Wix Harmony has blown me away. It's a website builder that lets me switch back and forth between using AI and hands-on editing tools, so I can create a website exactly the way I pictured it. I even get a personal AI agent that's an expert in web design and helps me out. Try it out for free at wix.com/harmony. That's wix.com/harmony.